Hey Marta, how are you?
Hey, Brian. I'm good. How are you?
Awesome, awesome. Thanks so much for joining the Peace Now podcast. I've been looking forward to this interview since we were talking about it, and really excited to see where it goes. I'm gonna ask before we get into the journey and learning a bit more about you and the unique gifts you offer to the world. I wanted to ask a question about passion because I've been researching some of your offerings and some of the stuff you're doing. I've of course listened to your awesome podcast and participated in a few of your offerings, and that's a thread that really seems to go through them all. You seem very passionate in what you're doing. You feel fully present and immersed in what you're doing. At least that's my view from the outside. And I was curious if you could remember, reflecting back on your journey and the story of Marta, if there's anything from early on, like childhood or adolescence, that you remember that really grabbed you. Like maybe it's the first thing that really grabbed you, or maybe it's something that just comes alive when I ask that question. Does anything come up like that?
Oh yeah, like first thing that comes up. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here. I'm so excited about your podcast. I think this is a wonderful, wonderful idea that I was very, very, very into and been following you, same as you've been following me, kind of just like guiding one another through this life and online. And I came to
Yeah,
one of your workshops online, the Wednesday workshops, and I loved it. So
cool.
it was a really wonderful space that you hold. So I'm very happy to be here. So
Thanks
thank
for
you
that,
for
Marta.
having me.
Absolutely.
And as far as your question for passion goes, it's really funny you said that because the first thing that always pops into my head from my childhood is the scavenger hunts that my brother and my sister used to send me on
Okay.
when I was younger.
Wow.
So they would create and weave these elaborate scavenger hunts, and one in particular. And it's so funny because I don't know how many they did for me when I was young, but I do remember there was one that lasted for weeks for me. So I feel like it was many. Um, and probably they were just doing it to get me out of their hair because we didn't live around a lot of other kids, and I was 8 years younger than them. But I would spend hours trying to figure out these clues that they left me, and it it has always been a passion of mine. It's always stuck with me. It's always just reminiscent of things that I come back to in my life, and it kind of weaves its way throughout everything. I kind of feel like.
That is so cool, Marta. Thanks for sharing that experience with us. Your siblings creating these fun scavenger hunts, and you would go off and kind of get lost in finding these clues. Some that seem pretty elaborate and multi-day adventures. And
Oh
maybe
yeah.
that's a really cool spirit, the scavenger hunt. Like that's one question I had about creating this podcast. Like, what are we looking for, and what and when we're practicing meditation, like what are we doing, what are we looking for, that kind of thing. The spirit of a scavenger hunt is kind of fun because it's very playful. Who knows what you'll find? There are clues along the way, hopefully. And so that's, I'm going to try to embody that scavenger hunt spirit through this podcast. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, and speaking of that, another question I had for you, it's kind of a traditional question. The podcast is new, but it's one episode long tradition of this question, which is a bit of a trick question, so I apologize. But the question is about you, and it's, who are you, Marta?
Oh, um, man, it's weird. That is such a hard question. I feel that the question that so many people struggle with, um, because it's pretty loaded. But I've learned, especially over the past year, that the answer always changes, and it's okay for the answer to change throughout your life. Um, so I'm going to answer it as a who I am right now.
Ooh, I love it.
And I would think right now I'm a person that is searching for simplicity and connection and peace and love and authenticity, and following what's really allows me to serve other people and serve myself. So, and being more playful. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think it's
Okay.
like one of those scavenger hunt things. Is we've been practicing meditation, and these really deep questions about identity and things that matter to us. Like some people were questioning them. Sometimes some people are doubling down on things. Some people, it sounded to me like they're like one way. So you said this beautiful thing about really some of like I was hearing them as values of yours, like inner peace and authenticity
Yeah.
and playfulness, and you're really trying to embody them in your life day to day, and identifying with those kind of things. And that's been a big question that's coming up for us. So I know it was a loaded question. Thanks for being flexible and going with it. We're just all really curious on the, and I love it also how you said that it can be fluid. Maybe that it doesn't have to be like I am this forever. It's like today or this week I'm feeling very playful and I want to embody that, and maybe it's a time for seriousness will arise, and that'll be what's necessary or what feels good. So that's what I was really hearing, is this idea about fluidity and just embracing that and accepting that, and then also having these kind of beautiful values. You think I'm tracking with you there?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that I feel it's a question that people start to ask themselves, probably as they get into their 20s, or maybe they've always asked themselves. And then, as you age, or if something happens to you that's like a big life event, you really, really start to deep dive into it. And for me personally, those things that I said became very just clear, like just very simplistic and clear. And I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Lovely, beautiful. And so we've talked about Marta, in the story of Marta, the scavenger hunt as a child, and then we're at now where you're in this place where you're embracing this kind of fluidity and trying to embody these kind of values. I'm wondering how, in between those points, where meditation kind of comes in. You talked about maybe people in their 20s start asking these questions about identity, and was that what it was like for you, or can you tell us like how this now you're someone facilitating these really unique and intriguing experiences for folks? How did that come about? I'm sure it's a long story, but what are some of the milestones, do you think?
One of the biggest milestones for me is because I'm a solo traveler. I do a lot of volunteer projects, and I've helped other women in particular like travel alone.
Mm.
And when I was 24, was it 24? No, 2004. Yes, sorry. I don't know. I can't remember. I was very young. I was right out of college. And yeah, it's somewhere around there. I'm 40. So anyways, I went on this solo volunteer project of a tomb excavation in Italy when I was really young. And it was my first time overseas. I had a terrible fear of planes. I had gotten out of a bad relationship, and I really had never been away from my hometown. And I came up against a little bit of a breakdown and a little bit of a point in my life that I was terrified of living my life, but not actually living my life. So I saw like this future ahead of me, and I was petrified of it. I was also scared of not ever finding myself, of being wrapped up in a relationship for so long, entangled with somebody else. I felt lost. I didn't know myself. So I just did it. I found, like, on page 12, this volunteer project. It was all written in Italian. I translated it. I knew a little bit of Italian, but not a ton. I called a lady up in the middle of the night. She was speaking all in Italian. Just passionate, just ready to do it. I was still living in my parents' house. I booked my ticket. I did a wire transfer.
Wow.
Got on 2 planes. Got on a 2-tiered bus in the middle of nowhere, a 3-hour bus ride, and met a man in a parking lot. And there was no Facebook. There was no Zoom.
Yeah.
There was none of this. I had to like rent a phone, and I think I used it 3 times to call my mom, and I was there for a month. So that for me was the beginning of trying to find something deeper, which I think, leading back to your question about meditation, that is where I started. So the real curiosity and the questioning started happening there, of trying to find more stillness, trying to find more meaning in my life. And that started there. Traveling alone for me, it was it's almost like a holy experience for me. It still is. It's something, it's a whole thing. And I think everybody should try it at least once in their life. But after that, I did a lot of other volunteer projects. And then I really, really started to get into meditation. Even though I was doing it, I didn't know I was doing it with the things that I was practicing, which is usually how it goes with meditation. You're like, oh, that's meditating. Oh, I took a long walk. I did art. I sketched. These are different forms of meditation. But my husband and I, about 10 years ago, wanted to find something a little bit deeper. So we studied transcendental meditation and took the course in that. And then that has been like my regular, constant practice for years. And then just deep diving into different other forms and practice. A lot of practice.
Yeah. Thank you for that. There's so many interesting threads there to pull on. I hope we can circle back to the transcendental meditation. It's one of our intentions with the podcast is to just hear people's perspectives on practice and the different things they tried. And that sounds like a really interesting one. But there's a couple things first that, it was great to hear you talk about your experiences with, first you'd mentioned a little earlier about how like major life events can be like an impetus or something that can be really meaningful. And it sounds like before this amazing travel experience, there was like a relationship thing going on, maybe the dissolution of a relationship, and then this solo traveling thing, like you were afraid of
terrified
planes, and then traveling alone. That's a big thing, especially before Facebook and texting and FaceTime and all that. And I think maybe first the thing I want to dialogue on is this idea of maybe meditation. Maybe there's an image that some of us might have of meditation as, like sitting like Zen style, which is cool, by the way, but on a zafu and just practicing like that. But you really felt something similar to meditation during your travels. And it's interesting. I think I might have come at it a little from the other direction, because when I first went traveling, I kind of fell into a little bit of despair because I couldn't get out of my automatic pilot, like my patterns and that kind of thing when I was traveling. And I was like, oh, this is disappointing. And then I later learned meditation. I was recently on a trip, and it felt so good to just kind of be present for the trip and the new experiences. That kind of, I guess the thing I'm wanting to highlight here is this kind of applied, like solo traveling for you is like a pilgrimage or a holy experience, and it's a form of meditation. I think that's really, really cool, and it makes sense, I think, but it is potentially liberating for some folks listening. Like the things we love, things that we can do fully present is our meditation, and that's giving ourselves permission to do that is great. Do you think that's what I was hearing from what you're talking about with traveling? Do you think we're on the same page there?
For sure. I think traveling is really important for perspective.
Mm.
And I think it's really important to sometimes, for many, many reasons, but I think it's important to see something bigger than yourself, to put things into perspective, and also step outside your comfort zone. That's huge. It's hard and it's scary, and it's so funny because I have a ton of people that always ask me, they're like, oh, you're so brave and you did this, and wow, I could never do this, and blah blah blah. And I just look at them and I just say, yes, you can, because I was terrified, and I still get scared. So it's not something that that you really ever get over. It's just pushing past that comfort zone into discomfort and sitting with it, and knowing that sitting in that comfort is going to change you, and it's going to stretch your barriers, and it's going to expand your mind, and open up this new world that you never knew was possible. So yeah, it's still scary. It's still, and it's so funny because every time I book like a volunteer project, or I know I'm going alone somewhere overseas, I right before it happens, I still have that fear. And now I know that fear, and I can look at it from like up here and say, oh, this is exciting. This is exciting. You're doing something new. You're stretching out, you're not like in fear of death, but it's a good fear.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's such an interesting part of the life we're living that, it's kind of like exercise or something. Courage, we grow as we kind of tear ourselves down just a little bit, just enough, like not
Yes.
overwhelming ability. That's obviously detrimental, but just those little challenges, learning something new, experiencing something new, traveling alone, even different people are on different parts of the journey. Traveling to a different place in the U.S. if you live here, or traveling internationally, or whatever that next step is, that's not going to be too overwhelming. Let's try it. I think that's a good challenge for us. Take some inspiration from Marta and try to challenge ourselves a bit, whether it's travel or just something that's a bit out of our comfort zone. I love that, Marta. Thank you for that invitation. And I'm wondering, maybe we can ask you now about, so you've really lived a life of meditation practice with traveling and engaging life in that kind of mindful way. But you did mention wanting to find something a little maybe deeper, I think you had said, or really immerse yourself in a practice. You've come across TM, or transcendental meditation. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what that's like, to as much as you're comfortable?
Yeah. Transcendental meditation it's really interesting because, I mean, like most meditation, it's simplistic. It's pretty simplistic. You are given a word or a mantra, and you can't share it with anyone else. It's yours, and you essentially repeat that word over and over in your mind until it loses meaning, until it stretches out. And in the beginning of transcendental meditation, in the beginning of meditation, what bubbles up to the surface for you is just garbage. It's your garbage, right? It's like it's the stuff that you are internalizing, that you're trying to get rid of, and then below that is kind of where you get to stillness, peace, quiet, home. I would say, like home into your deeper self. So that's what it's like. And traditionally, you are supposed to do TM for 20 minutes a day, twice a day.
Okay.
And for most people, that's very challenging. Very, very challenging. Even for myself, I'll go in and out, and I'll try, and then I'll go through spells where I'll be really great about it, and then, of course, like dip in and out based on your mood. But I always come back to it. So it really helped a lot.
Okay, so transcendental meditation is a practice where there's a community and you have a teacher, and you're given a mantra that is for you, that's personalized for you, which that sounds really cool. And then you repeat it, and interesting experiences seem to happen, or I was hearing you describe your experiences. So I'm tracking this. You kind of have sometimes felt an experience of the word kind of losing meaning and stretching out and kind of changing, and something's happening with your consciousness as you're faithfully repeating this mantra. And there's this other thing that I was hearing, and this is intriguing to me because one of our intentions is to explore obstacles that come up for folks, is, and myself, of course, is that things like challenges come up, like things, worries. Like me, for example, I have a lot of negative thoughts about myself that will come up when I'm meditating. And it's funny that it seems to happen whether you're doing just following the breath or doing a practice like TM, is that seems to be a very common experience, is like unconscious feelings and thoughts seem to come up for a lot of people. But then there's an experience of, I don't know exactly what it is, maybe I can ask you, but there's a kind of a change from them, or they're kind of dropped away, and then you describe it as going home, but there's maybe a feeling of peace or a feeling of connection.
Yeah.
Describe different things. Yeah, what do you think?
I think they get released. And then there's just you. And then, you've gotten to the point where or you realize certain things about yourself, like maybe you're exhausted, maybe like your body is craving rest, and you fall asleep. And that happens to a lot of people in meditation that I've found. People that are overworked, overstressed, that don't meditate, they go into a meditation and they just pass out. Or I'm teaching a yoga class, and in Shavasana, there's generally always one person that falls asleep. So to me, that's just your body craving rest and your mind craving rest. And that happens a lot too. So it's pretty magical. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. That is really interesting. I actually haven't done an in-person yoga class since the pandemic. So we're shooting this in relatively early 2022. And that was always one of my favorite parts, is in Shavasana and somebody snoring, and it's like, oh, this is great. Someone's getting some well-needed rest. And that is a beautiful thing. With meditation, if your body is calling for rest, you might discover that. So it could be and that is often looked as an obstacle. So that's a really interesting way you're framing it, Marta, is maybe it's supposed to be what's happening. Some of these obstacles might be like the practice, because I wonder what you think of this. This is something that I'm really working on right now, is kind of making the obstacle the practice. Like, because I guess I'm wanting to get to the peace. Maybe that's why I called it the show, Peace Now. But a lot of people we've been talking to, and it sounds like you were kind of saying this as well, but I want to double check, is that like if I'm facing self-hatred or anxiety, but this is kind of what is showing up right now, and to kind of process it, to sit with it, is a good thing. I mean, what do you make of that? Because it's kind of turned twisted on me, because I have to admit I did start meditation to get rid of my problems, or what I was framing as my problems. Now I'm starting to just try to accept them more, and just give myself some self-compassion and say maybe anxiety is just a thing you live with, and that's okay. But that I probably wouldn't have started. It seems like a bit of baiting and switching my past self a little bit. with that, if that makes sense. So I don't know, what do you think of this thing about wanting to accept challenges, but also recognizing that there's a peace coming, but not wanting to long for the peace so much that we're kind of ignoring the challenges? And what do you make of that whole kind of mess?
Uh, so it's hard to answer. There's two ways I can go about answering this. The first one, part of meditation is to almost view yourself from an outside perspective, bias, or any need to fix yourself about what comes up within you. So like the whole idea of that release is just letting those emotions bubble to the surface and then letting them go so that you don't fester on them, because that's how we get the way we get, right? That is anxiety, is like this festering, this cog in the machine of it, that we can't like release. It's exactly it. It's like
Yeah, I like that.
So that's part of it. Another part of it is almost separating that form of meditation to try to get to the solution, because I feel if you approach meditation in a daily practice of quiet practice like that, it almost defeats the purpose of the meditation, because it's one of those things, and I'm very much a person, and I completely understand this, that when you want something, you want it now.
Mm-hmm.
When you want to feel relief, you want to feel it now. When you want your anxiety to go away, you want it to go away right now, or have that long-term effect. But the practice of meditation and being still, if you keep up with it and you're consistent, it will slowly, incrementally change you. So I don't think you need to kind of attack your meditation practice in that way. But I will say, on the other hand of that, like I was talking about how there's so many different forms of meditation, rather than just sitting on a pillow and being all eat, pray, love, is like it. There was a time this past year when I had really, really bad anxiety one day, and I could not get rid of it. And actually laying on a pillow or trying to do breath work and things like that was making me more anxious, was giving me more anxiety. And the only thing that alleviated my anxiety was sitting down and writing a list. That was it. Because it gave me a focus, and it gave me some sort of control. And it just like, and I didn't even realize that my anxiety was released until I was done with the list, which is how this goes, right? Like you don't, the biggest changes within ourselves, we don't realize are happening until we're here and we're looking back at our journey and we're like, whoa, geez.
Yeah.
So I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's just kind of riffing on something, and you, I think, articulated and contextualized it beautifully. I just have to admit, I'm almost like speechless. I'm so excited. If you're giving me permission to make list making a meditation practice, like I'm going to be enlightened in like 2 weeks. I'll probably be 200 lists in the next 2 weeks. So
lists are great.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be anything other than a purge. They don't have to be, you don't have to be beholden to them. You know, they don't have to be this to-do list that's hanging over your head. It's just the act of getting it out of your head. It's like purging whatever is in your head and getting it out and releasing it. And having that release is writing it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that, Marta. Yeah, that's exciting to me with the list making. I was wondering now if, because you've talked about some of what you gained in with traveling, and you've talked about what you've gained from your transcendental meditation practice. I love following the kind of creations you're making in the offerings and the work you're doing in the world. I'm wondering, I'm remembering a little, I don't know exactly what I would call it, but a I think it was a practice, but you described it with the word restore, which really sticks to me. And you were talking
Mm.
about an experience, an injury you had, and how that kind of had changed from your meditation practice. I mean, it was reminding me a bit of what you were talking about with like this the sleeping, a little bit more extreme in your case, but do you think that that experience you had? First of all, would you be willing to talk to us about that experience and how it changed your practice and some of what blossomed from that experience, that you help others with? And I'm curious if that kind of relates to a little bit of our conversation about like making practice whatever's in front of you and that being okay. Do you think those things connect?
Whew. Yeah, they all connect.
Okay.
um, so my husband and I studied transcendental meditation, and I played around with it, but it wasn't an essential part of my day at that point. You know what I mean? It wasn't something like I needed. It wasn't a daily, it may have been a daily routine, but it wasn't something I craved as part of like me, as part of like the things that I do. So in early 2019, I believe it was 2019, 2018. Oh my God, COVID just messed everything up for me, and everyone. Uh, I was going through, at that point in my life, I was really into hot yoga. I was like obsessed with it. I'd finally found something that, like an activity that I loved to do, that would keep me in shape and keep me absorbent into it, because I never had that before. I was never like a sports person, like I didn't do any of those things. So to find something like that was very special for me. And that combined the mindfulness and the flow and the workout and the power and the core work and the heat. I love heat. So I became super obsessed with it. And I was going like 6 days a week. I became really proud of myself that I could do, or was learning to do, handstands and headstands and crows and arm balances and all these cool funky shapes that I never thought I could do. Um, and it was getting to a point where I decided to join teacher training just to educate myself, like not to teach anyone. And I was inside the teacher training about 2 weeks in, and then I got rear-ended in a car accident because I did sales for work. So I got kind of like smushed between two cars, and it really affected my ability to do any mobility stuff at all. I I couldn't get out of bed without like pain. I like child's pose was hard, really painful. And so I still participated in teacher training while I was going to physical therapy, and doing a bunch of other stuff to restore my body. But what that did is that it forced me, like hardcore forced me to go inside and take a look at myself. And that was really, really hard because I couldn't move. So I had to sit still for the first time in my life. And I also had to kind of like beat down my ego, because it opened up a world for me to realize that yeah, yoga was great. It is great. I'm very happy I got into it, all of these things, but this particular yoga for me had me in competition with myself, and the other people in the room. Like I had to do that headstand, I had to do that crow, I had to do, like I would feel like a failure if I didn't do it. I'd be like, oh, that class, like I can't believe I didn't get that, or I fell out. Oh my God, like why? And removing that off of the table was so humbling.
Mm.
And watching my other peers be able to learn and do all of this stuff was just so humbling. But what it did and opened up a world for me was to really, really like cut down my ego completely and go more inward and discover that stillness and peacefulness does so much more for me than that ever did. And everything's kind of like a gateway to something else, right? Like you grow into things and then you grow out of things. And that's like how we all evolve. It's like looking back on your 20s scene. I was just talking to somebody else about this that was like, oh man, that bar, I can never go back there. Like, ew, that's gross. And like that bar's just gross or something like that. And then it's stepping out of that and looking back on your 20s, be like, yeah, you don't want to be there right now. That's not you. But 20-year-old, you loved that.
Yeah.
Like, so anyways, I digress. But yeah, that really forced me to go inward and then really focus more on pain management, stability, core work, mobility, and peacefulness and authenticity in self. So that's what I teach now. And the reason I teach it now is because it is my practice. It has to be my practice. I was forced to make it my practice, and then I realized how much of a shift it had in me, and it was a very welcome shift because I feel like it prepared me for some hardships that I had to face in the future without me knowing. So,
yeah,
sorry, that was a lot.
No. It's very extremely poignant. Thank you for sharing that part of your journey. It's coming through to me that through your life, yeah, there's been these kind of key moments, and they've taken you in different directions. Someone on the podcast talked about this thing. We're really working on it in our group about making the challenge like the guru, like making this moment of adversity, kind of framing it as something. Yeah, we wish maybe, of course, that horrible car accident didn't happen, but it did happen, and it did open a gateway to this really, and it just comes through so much with you, Marta, and the teachings you do, and just your presence is calming. And that is interesting to hear that you kind of came both earlier in the travels, like really facing this. The solo travel is extremely exhilarating, obviously, and just getting on the plane and doing it, and that feels really cool. I like that feeling. And then, of course, the hot yoga 6 days a week, which is an intense practice, and kind of facing down physical challenges and pushing through them. But then this new chapter opens up where, based on an external circumstance that we can't really control, those kind of injuries that happen, unfortunately, and it seemed to really teach you a lesson of stillness and peace and authenticity. That's really coming through. So that's just really cool to kind of hear the context of how that happened. And also this, yeah, it's interesting. I think with meditation practice, there are these abilities to explore like kind of new frontiers of life. And you're doing this inner peace, this kind of practice of stillness and inner peace, that kind of came to you organically through your life experience. You now do like, is this related to some of the stress reduction yoga you work on?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I mean, for example, when I was doing yoga 6 days a week, if I had a pain, I would push through it. If I was tired, I would push through it. I wasn't listening to my body. I wasn't listening to myself. And I think it's really hard to do that because you get wrapped up, there's outside influences everywhere. I mean, everywhere, and media and everything. And what this really allowed me to do was to start to tune inward to what my body needs, what's actually good for my body, what's good for my mind, and break through that the things that may have once served me just don't serve me anymore. And that's really, really hard. That comes with like that's a whole nother podcast about like breaking down your identity and, like, I mean, and dealing with that and having to deal with that. But the stress relief really came around. And so now I host, I help people with their stress and their stress relief. I do like one-on-one consultations with people and whatnot, but I really started I do a stress relief class online on Sundays at 8 p.m. And the only reason I started that is because I needed it really badly. Last year was a particularly hard year for me and my family. So I created this stress relief class for my husband and I to connect and really, sit and breathe together and have this ritual. And then shortly after that, I wanted to offer it as a free class to some nursing staff that I knew was having like a hard time during COVID. So I offered it to them. And then eventually I offered it as like a pay what you can class so that anybody with any income can join in and get the benefits. And it just creates like this stability and this ritual that I have every week. And it means so much to me. Like, for my own personal practice, it's like everything. I think I skipped it 1 week back when my husband and I were doing it, and it just like my whole week was a little bit off. Like I could tell. So yeah, stress relief, important.
Yeah. Wow, that was so cool to hear about the origin story of that class. About how it started off, for you and your husband, because it was just in a needed time, and so that comes from like a really authentic roots in your practice, and it's kind of evolved to helping nurses, and then and now to the general public. And this stress thing is really interesting, because one of the things that's going on in our community is there's just such a meditation is really broad thing, right? And there's so many, there's like, folks who come to our group through like Eastern forms of meditation, folks who come through our groups, coming out of like praying, folks who come to our groups who are really coming through like the psychology, like through their therapy and through their self-care, they're learning it. And it's just this really interesting conglomeration of different perspectives. And the stress one, it seems a lot of people are intersecting there. It's like, yeah, we're all agreeing that feeling of stress. And I think the first research they did on mindfulness from a psychological perspective was with stress reduction, and it worked so amazing for that. And this is what I wanted to ask you about, since you're kind of working with people in stress all the time. We did like a 12-week course going through stress reduction, and there were multiple people who reported the same thing of just kind of chronic stress being so normalized. Like just the practice of stress reduction was so radical, because it's like a sickness, almost like being overstressed is like being sick, but it's just, we were all so used to it, didn't realize like it's not that normal. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be normal to like constantly have a heart beating really fast and constantly be tense and tight, like, and not being able to go to sleep, etc. And so I was just wondering if that's kind of been your experience with folks who are stressed. And I'm also like I'm just excited to share like the good news of stress reduction, because because I think it's something really powerful to do, and I want
it's so powerful. A couple things with this. Number one, I feel like you said that, especially in the United States, like our work culture is, the busier you are and the more you work is almost more valued. It's like one of the first things that you say to someone when you meet them is, what do you do? Right. And I actually hate that question. I think it's terribly puts people on their guard. I think it should be more like, what do you love to do, instead of what do you do? But there is this value on overworking yourself, and the people that are stressed, they don't know they're stressed, or maybe they do, and they just, it's, we all hold it. It just comes in so many different forms. It creeps up into the jawline. Like, if you're a person that clenches your jaw like I do, I clench my jaw when I sleep. And it's like the worst. And that's where like I hold my stress now a lot of the time. So I think if people can identify and admit that they're stressed, that's another key point in this culture. Vulnerability is a strength and not a weakness. I mean, I know that's very like Brené Brown to say, but it's so true, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you can just admit that you're stressed, no one is going to look at you differently. If anything, you will now create a more compassionate network, because the person you are worried about thinking that they're going to think you're weak will probably open up and be like, yeah, I'm stressed too. Like, wow, we can admit that to one another. Okay, what can we do about it? What are some actionable steps that we can take? And the second thing that I wanted to touch on with that, to your question, is I used to call my Sunday evening class, I used to call it yoga and meditation, because to me that's stress relief, right? But I think a really important thing to say, and I have noticed a difference, is I changed the wording of that to just stress relief class. And I think that opens up, it makes it more available and approachable to a lot of people, because meditation is extremely intimidating. That word is extremely intimidating. And it's also, I think, a trigger word that has associations when people hear it. I might talk to a long-standing girlfriend. She's like, I don't meditate. I don't need to meditate. I have wine or whatever. I don't sit on a cushion. Yeah. I'm not going to sit still. But if I tell her, are you stressed? To be like, oh yeah, work's breathed me down, blah, blah, be like, okay, well, come to stress relief class. And in the class, there is meditation, but I don't know, it just seems so much more approachable. And yeah, to your point, I mean, stress relief is a very important thing. It's very, very important in order to just keep going as human, to reset.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. That's so interesting. So the first thing I was hearing was this kind of maybe it's a cultural thing, about linking kind of stress and hard work or difficulty with like productivity. And so that's one thing. And then this really interesting thing you said about just admit your stress. Like that's not like that vulnerability is very, very powerful. Like if it's just calling out that authenticity of calling out a stressful environment, it's probably going to be cathartic. It might lead to positive change. And yeah, and people who don't like it, maybe you can just connect with a more compassionate network. I love that idea. But I was thinking as you're talking, it's also like, it goes back to, it reminds me of what you were talking about with transitioning from 6 days a week kind of power yoga into kind of a more peaceful, restorative kind of vibe. This is a challenge I really face, Marta, is I am stuck in that first one of thinking busyness and stress equal, like if I'm getting paid to do something, I need to be stressed, essentially, is like an unconscious belief. And I'm kind of starting to challenge this a little bit. I find myself like giving ease a chance, like maybe things can be easy and maybe they'll actually flow better. On one hand, maybe this is just a challenging job and I need a break. But sometimes it's been the case for me that like just ease and just not being stressed actually makes me more effective. But there's a part of me that definitely doesn't believe that. So I have to be really gentle with that part. And yeah, that's related to a whole thing about inner self-criticism and stuff like that, which I think is sometimes related to stress or the fear of releasing stress.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I started doing for companies and corporations, I do stress relief classes.
Wow.
And yeah, and that is also something like related to your work. That is also something that is not normalized in companies at all. It's not something we think about, is to, hey, we give a lunch break. That's cool. But how about a mental break? You
Yeah.
know, how about like a mental break, and how much more productive will people be? How much more recharged will they be if they know that that's waiting for them? And then those lasting effects will continue throughout your day and into your life. So you have a break in your work day that is normalized now. It's recognized by your company. They are offering it. And I just think I think all companies should have it. But because if you don't have it, you're never going to think of it. If you take the time for yourself, you almost consider yourself selfish, you know, to take that time to like, oh, why do I need this when other people maybe don't need this? John sitting over there is pumping out all kinds of spreadsheets and reports, and he doesn't feel like he needs any stress relief. Why do I need any stress relief? Oh my God. And then you're just down on yourself when really John's probably ready to have a panic attack. So
Yeah. For everyone in the audience who thinks that like I make spreadsheets, I don't know if I pump them out, but trust me, the spreadsheet person definitely needs the stress reduction practice too. So he's on.
And I'm not picking on John's,
Yeah.
you know, John's of the world.
Yeah. We love you.
I'm sure
John.
you're very relaxed.
Yeah. That's great stuff, Marta. Thank you for that work you're doing with that. I'm really encouraged to hear that there are some companies out there who are receptive to that, and hopefully we can slowly but surely, or hopefully quickly, but at least we're starting to make some progress on I think a more compassionate and vulnerable way of working. But then also, hopefully, I mean, this might be a romantic dream, but I do have a belief that more ease will lead to easier better focus and that kind of thing as well. So I guess we'll see, and
Absolutely.
keep us updated on the work you're doing. Okay, speaking of the scavenger hunt, there's kind of a twist or a new turn coming in our interview. It's a question I try to ask everyone because it's a particular passion of mine. It does come up in our group a lot. Probably because I'm shepherding us there, but it's about the topic of dreams or dreaming, like what's happening.
Ooh.
I know with you, it's kind of it's maybe a double thing, and some people have taken it because we could dream into the future, which is really cool. But then we also dream when we're sleeping, and so either one of those, like in your practice, in your life, on your journey. Well, first of all, do you have vivid dreams? Do you work with the dream world at all? And what are some of your thoughts on dreaming?
Man, I love this subject. This is a great question, by
Thank
the way. Or maybe it's just hitting me at home for me right now. But so my sister passed away last April from cancer, and we were very close. And you know, I have all of her journals. Those are things that are very prized to me, you know, prized possessions, and that I care about deeply. And one of the things that I have, and one of the things we would always talk about, it was a subject like we constantly talked about our entire lives. We would buy each other dream journals.
Oh, okay.
And we would talk about our dreams all the time. We'd be calling one another up as soon as we wake up, be like, "Oh my God, this dream! I was a space cadet, and there was arms everywhere, but it was really a mall, and there was ice cream on my face. I don't know. What do you think it means? What do you think? Like, like, should I take the job? I don't know." So, anyways, she what I found after her passing in her box was one of her old dream journals that I had purchased for her, and so half of it is filled out until like 2018 she got to,
Wow.
where she stopped writing them down, but it inspired me to pick it back up again. And so now I keep it by my bedside table, and I've really, really been uh, nurturing that my dreams a lot as of late. I'm doing like this 100-day challenge that I kind of do every year, and keep adding days on where like I'm not doing any alcohol or like sugar or anything. Oh, sorry, I lost you for a minute.
That's okay.
My bad.
No problem.
And so that has actually made some really incredible vivid dreams as
Oh,
of late. So I've been having the practice. I wake up in the morning, I write down my dreams, anything that I can think of, even if it's just a name or a word or whatever. And that practice has had me exploring and remembering more of my dreams, and then relating them to see like what's going on in my life a little bit.
mm. Okay, cool. So that I love the word you use, nurturing. You've been kind of nurturing that kind of connection through just exploring them. Well, first of all, it's a thank you for talking about your sister. It's a blessing to have her presence mentioned on our show, and it sounds like a really beautiful connection you had around dreams, and that's a great gift to be sharing those dream journals. And it sounds like a real treasure to come across that journal, and that it inspired you to nurture, as you said, your own practice, and maybe connected a little bit to some of the challenge practice you're doing has been potentially, or sounds like it's creating like a really vivid dream life, and you've been recording them. And you said like maybe that's connecting to your waking world a little bit, so you're seeing some things bleed through.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing some things bleed through for sure. Like things that I need to pull back on, things that I need to be more prepared for. Um, there's like this weird reoccurring dream that I'm sure everybody has had once in their life, where it's you have either a show or you have a test, and it's the day of the show or the day of the test, and you don't know what it's about. Like you don't remember your lines, or you don't know anything on the subject of this test that you're about to take. And usually when I have that dream specifically, it's like, oh, okay, well, let's put more work. Number one, let's put more work into being more prepared for what's coming up. Number two, maybe taking a step back and taking something off your plate, like, yeah, like maybe your arms are in too many things.
Yeah. Oh, that's
really which I have a habit of doing, but I've like working on it over the years.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, that's cool. I do believe I did read somewhere. Maybe I should fact check myself, like in the moment, but I did read somewhere that one about the kind of anxiety of missing stuff is cross cultural. Of course, it wouldn't be at school or taking the test, but different cultures have big events, and folks dream about missing them or showing up late or showing up without clothes or something like that. And wow, okay, so but you. When you have these dreams, you maybe apply it to situations. It seems like kind of a really cool, intuitive, symbolic way of interacting, which I think is a real fun way to live life. Of course, sometimes intuition gives us warnings and that kind of stuff, but it can also lead to creative new ideas and a playfulness, and help us find the next clue or whatever kind of metaphor you want to use.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can, and then you can just manifest what you want from that, like your dreams, your aspirations, your visions, like whatever you want. You can use it as a beacon a little bit. I mean, if you're watching reruns of the same show over and over and over again, and they keep coming up in your dreams, there's that happens too.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I think that's maybe a bit of a theme for us as I'm kind of reflecting on what we've talked about so far. Is it seems that you have a real ability to loosen the boundaries between things. That what is meditation practice versus life. It can be more fluid. What's a value one day, we can be more fluid. And I'm also seeing that with the dreams and the waking world. that, yeah, we're sleeping, it's much different, but we can allow some of those capacities and abilities and gifts that come from dreaming to spill into everyday life, and both as a warning and also as a creative idea generator. I think that's a really, really cool idea. That's one reason I'm really interested in dreams, because we do it a lot. We sleep a lot. I want to connect to that part of myself. And it was so cool to hear you talk about your approach to doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Marta, you've been extremely generous with your time. Thank you so much for talking with me about your story, your experiences, your gifts and capacities, and what you're sharing with the world. I do have one more question, and I think we've touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious if maybe we can go deeper if something else comes up. And it's about things in your life on your journey, maybe specifically related to meditation or practice in some way, or lessons you've learned or teachings that seem really applicable to you. Is there anything, something memorable in your past, a teaching you received, or a practice you've done, or a memory, some kind of lesson that really is permeating everything you're doing now? And I was wondering if anything came up like that that's very memorable or stuck with you through the years, and if you'd be willing to share that with us and the audience. Does anything come to mind with that one?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this one's hard. It's
Mhm.
I mean, it's easy, but it's hard. Honestly, my sis, like, just her and her experience and her passing, Nina was her name, and I want to say just the gift of being able to lay after that, and go through transition, and kind of just the breakdown. There's that song. What is that song? Something Beauty in the Breakdown. It was really popular. I think it was on the Garden State soundtrack. I think I really understood that song until, like, I've kind of landed and I look back, and when you're in this breaking point of rediscovering yourself, you get to one of your lowest points, and then you rebuild. So I think, one, to your question about what has been a significant time for this transition or meditation or things of that nature, and how is it affected by that, I think that has affected me in such a way that it has turned my practice inwards to try and help myself. But more so, it has given me this empathy to help others. Like, where can I help others? Like, what can I offer that I have discovered that helped me, that maybe it helps someone else? Like, maybe, if, whether it's like the vision board, or if it's meditating, or like, I don't know, even a song that, like, really got me through a day. Like, how can I pass it on? Because by passing it on, it allows her to almost live again, and it allows me to find peace as well. Yeah, I just think that's been the biggest one, and it's a constant learning practice, and also just realizing that with that comes the wisdom that you are just learning from everyone around you all the time, and you constantly will be learning forever. Forever and ever and ever. It's pretty comforting in a way, and like curiosity, but I hope that answered your question.
Oh, absolutely. Beautifully.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, like, one thing that really inspires me, it actually gives me a lot of hope, and is very comforting, is both in my journey and talking with others who are doing this practice with us, is there's moments of really intense grief or really intense sorrow or really intense pain, when if it's the loss of another person or loss of a lifestyle, like especially like in the addiction world, like a loss of a part of the self. And there's it's really
any
tough.
loss is significant, and there's so many different kinds. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes.
No, and it can be very overwhelming at times to kind of be in that kind of very almost destructive place, or that chaotic place of like nothing's really working, and kind of feel like I'm drowning is a metaphor that people will often use. And it's always, I feel like that the transformation from that place, like the despair, to hope is like one of the most beautiful experiences that we have as humans. And it's really great to and really inspiring. It's really nice in those moments to meet other people who have kind of really authentically been through those moments, and they have landed at a place of peace and are wanting to give back. So I just want to thank you for offering that to us. It really makes a huge difference, especially in the middle of it, when the hope seems like really far off or something like that. Oof. And so I think that's a really beautiful. I know that's a really beautiful offering you're giving, and that was a beautiful answer to the question, and absolutely a great testament to the memory of Nina. And it's so awesome that you're doing that. So thank you, Marta. And I'm curious now, because we've sprinkled through a few of them. There's so many cool things that you've talked about, some of your offerings. Maybe we could spend the last 2 or 3 minutes together talking about where we could find you if we want to like get involved in some of your work, or follow along with travel or with meditation or the stuff you're doing. Where can we find Marta on the web?
So it's all over at martaonthemove.com, and that website is about to be hopefully revamped, because it has like you really see the evolution of like everything that I'm doing in the past 8 years or something, of however long I've been doing it. But you can join my newsletter there. That has anything that I'm up to goes out to my newsletter first. So I just had like a vision board workshop the past 3 weekends, which was really lovely, of setting intentions and clearing away the things that don't serve us. So you'll hear about that. And then something I'm always excited for, I started combining my love of travel with yoga and meditation. And last year I launched my first, I launched a course, a 3-to-Be-Me course, but after that I launched a yoga sailing retreat in Croatia, and it was wonderful, and it was amazing, and all that in a bag of chips. And so this year in 2022, I have 4 coming up. I have 2 in Sicily, 1 in Greece, which there still is availability. I think there's maybe 3 spots left. Don't quote me on that, but you can email me through the newsletter as well to find out more information about that. And then I'm working on specifically a healing from grief sailing retreat as well in June. Wow. So we'll see.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll make sure that wherever you're watching this, you have some access to Marta's amazing offerings. And Marta, I just want to thank you so much for spending time with us, for what you're offering the world, and we hope to see you soon at one of your offerings. And yeah, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Brian. This was wonderful.
Have a great day. Okay.
You too.